Well, fuck a duck. Seriously, fuck a diddly duck. What is going on? What is going on in the world? It's kind of beyond belief. I've spent my life being utterly miserable because of what could happen, and now it's all happening. One of the benefits of living in the UK is you can indulge yourself in thoughts of how awful the world is for others without actually having to do a great deal. As actually, life is pretty bloody easy. But recently, things have changed. My last 2 years have been ruined by a virus that began its journey in some bat's mouth or a research lab in China and ended up in my nasal passage. And now, as if that wasn't enough, we're on the brink of World War Bloody Three. It's a little bit. What's the best word? It's all a little bit stressful. It's like, seriously, you go from a bloody pandemic, and whatever your thoughts are on the pandemic, whether or not it was just a big conspiracy, the fact is things changed. And now we are at the, let's not say the brink of World War Three, because we don't actually want to bring it into reality. And also, what does World War mean anymore? It's not World War. It's just magnified disagreements between a few fuckwit men in positions of power. You know, let's not call it World War Three. It's a spat, ideological spat between a couple of idiots, and you know, it's like, well, that was it. It's just almost, it's too much. It's too much. I mean, all of us are struggling, aren't we? It's like you're trying to go round, you know, your day-to-day life. I mean, this all started on the 24th of February, actually. And that's when I really began to crap myself. I was sitting in my local bijou coffee shop, sipping my oat milk decaf latte when I decided to look at the news. I deleted most of my news apps from my phone because I'd started to do this thing they call doom scrolling. And for a person like myself who suffers from a panoply of mental health issues which are related to anxiety, you know, these news streams aren't, they're not good. They're not good. So I deleted those. But anyway, I went online and it was like, oh, great. The pandemic, interestingly, the pandemic ended, well, in the UK, completely ended the day Vlad Putin went went into Ukraine. Fascinating how that all worked out. But anyway, also the good thing is it took the heat off Johnson's partying. I mean, bloody hell, he must have been exhausted anyway. So he was probably quite relieved to have a break from all those parties and, you know, get involved in some serious geopolitics, because he's good at that, isn't he? You know, his little saber rattling Boris out there. Well, he's in Saudi Arabia today. That's good, you know, because we're taking or reducing our dependence on fuel sources that are, you know, controlled by one pretty unpleasant regime. We've decided let's you know, increase our investment and our you know, involvement with Saudi Arabia. It's a good move. It's a good move. And then of course we've got to frack the shit out of the land because there are no alternatives. Anyway, that's an aside. So there I was, 24th of February, and sitting in the coffee shop, and I was like, oh fuck, fucking fuck, Putin's done it. He's done it. He's gone and invaded Ukraine. And of course, being the selfish little shit I am, my first concern was about myself. For some reason, I have a fear of nuclear war. There's something about the threat of nuclear assured destruction, mad, that I don't know, it just doesn't sit comfortably with me. It seems a bit silly that we've created these weapons that if they're used, they destroy the planet. So you use them as a deterrent, fair enough, but then if you were to actually use them, then you destroy everything. So if you kind of try to gain territory or resources through a war, which leads to nuclear conflagration, it kind of undermines the purpose of that initial invasion. It's a funny thing, but it doesn't make sense to me. So of course, when you know, Putin started talking about putting his nuclear arsenal on some sort of alert, what does it all mean? It's like, we just hope that there is some line of authority and it's not just one person's little finger on the button. But anyway, that's when I was like, oh, seriously, I've got a lot of personal issues I'm working through without the threat of a nuclear war. And that's what I feel with this. These people, in fact, they're being a bit inconsiderate. They're not thinking about you and me. And, the fact that tonight I've got to decide whether I'm having lasagna, fish and chips, some vegan thing I cooked the other day. But it's not very considerate, thoughtful. And that's what really upsets me. But anyway, so yeah, nuclear war makes me feel uncomfortable. And then, of course, I saw the pictures coming out of Ukraine and I cried. I burst into tears. How the fuck could this be happening in Europe in 2022? Now, it's easy to ignore all the other atrocities happening in the world because they are distant in both time and place. And this really kind of shocked me. So I was talking to, what was her name? I don't know, Mrs. Miggins from 35 Fairview Crescent or something. And she's quite middle class, She would like to think she's, upper class. But anyway, we were talking about how awful the Ukrainian situation was. And she was like, yes, and they look like us. So it's somehow worse. And my whole fucking world collapsed because you realise that there are some real idiots out there who literally are only or can only show empathy when the people who are being bombed to shit look like them. If they look slightly different, it's like, well, that's acceptable. I can cope with that. But when people look like you, then somehow that's more significant. So anyway, this was, this situation in Ukraine is close enough to home to impact people, their family and their friends. And like others, I panicked. I did panic. What could I do? Some people were painting blue and yellow sort of flags on their faces and listening to Ukrainian folk music and, getting their bumper stickers. And, that's what we do in a time of crisis. It's like, oh my God, I've got to do something that makes a real statement and changes the world. And I did much the same. I was sort of like, what do I do? I'm like panicking about nuclear war. I'm panicking about this situation. So I decided to get my paints out, got my sketchbook out, and I thought, yeah, let's do something really powerful. So I found a picture of Picasso's dove and I printed out, cut it out, and then I thought, right, let's cut the little shit's head off. So I cut the dove's head off, put the head on one side of the paper, the body on the other, and then I got a hammer and sickle, and I put the sickle through the dove's neck, and then dripped some blood, red paint onto this earth, which had blue and yellow, the Ukrainian flag, and I was like, yes, that's my statement. Posted it up on Facebook. I was a bit disappointed. I didn't get the number of likes that I'd sort of envisioned. It's like this. I thought it was a good piece of art. It was very powerful, very, very powerful. But no one seemed to like it. And my feeling is they didn't understand it. It was perhaps a little bit too highbrow. But anyway, I then realised it's like, ooh, is this the most powerful thing I can do? Creating a collage. And then I was also like, Mike, you're kind of losing the point. It's slightly more than this. And perhaps you, as many others, aren't necessarily understanding the true causes of this conflict. And that's when I realised that the complexity is so important. And look at this room. I surround myself with books. I've read at least 3 or 4 of these. I'm well read, very intelligent, very clever indeed. But I know fucking nothing. And it was that realisation after completing my collage. It's like, you don't have a fucking clue what's going on. So, I have spent my life trying to understand complex problems. And what really hit me was that I was buying into simple narratives of the war in Ukraine. And these narratives were the ones perpetuated by those in power, who don't want us to think too deeply. Their power is dependent on the masses being dumbed or dumbed down. That's how they stay in power, because people like you and me jump on those simple narratives of good versus evil. And as we all know, Putin is evil, the West is good. At least that's what we're led to believe. That's what we're fed 24/7 from our media channels, from our politicians. But we need to know what's really going on in the world. And of course, Putin is a complete and utter, I shouldn't use the word, it's an awful word, I won't use it, but he's a complete and utter knob. What he's doing in Ukraine is utterly abhorrent. This fact cannot be questioned. And most of us hope he will choke to death on his pelmeni. They're apparently pelmeni, the little traditional Russian dumplings, sort of thing that could get nicely stuck in your throat. Anyway, of course, there are lots of people who are hoping that this will happen. This evil dictator will somehow just disappear and we can get back to life as it should be. Well, at least for you and me. Forget the others. They're, not expendable as such, but it's really about our freedom that's important. That's why we're so concerned. The thing is, if you bother to do more than read the headlines of the mainstream, or that the mainstream media are peddling, you soon realise that there are reasons why Putin is pissed off. Of course, this doesn't excuse him for these abhorrent actions, but it's not as simple as we're being led to believe. It really isn't. There's a lot that's been going on between Russia and Ukraine and between the NATO alliance that are pissing him off. Of course, lots of us have been pissed off. During lockdown, I got really pissed off, but apparently Putin was, understandably during lockdown was like only able to speak to a few key advisors, getting very angry, and then it's like, well, fuck this, I'm going to invade a country, Ukraine, brilliant, let's do it. And so you can understand he was frustrated, but there are different ways of showing that frustration, and those of us who've worked through our complex mental health issues understand that invading another country isn't always the best way to deal with that. It's a bit like me going around getting really pissed off and breaking into Brian's house next door. It's like, no, there are other ways, but obviously when you've got a big fucking army and lots of nuclear warheads, the thought of invading another country is like, let's just do it. Cool. So anyway, the fact is there are reasons that led to this situation. And I'm not here to explore those reasons. I don't have the requisite knowledge, but I am here to say something around our sort of shared inability to think critically about what's going on. And this inability to think critically is perhaps the biggest threat to human security. We just do not know anymore, or the general population seems incapable of digging deeply into issues. They want they want to see things as simple, easy, understandable, but they're deeper, they're more complex. And we owe it to ourselves, and especially our children, to challenge the dominant narratives that those who have the power, those with political and economic power, and those with financial power, want us to believe. And these people rely on the fact that the majority of us are dumb, or we're mute. We've lost touch. We cannot resonate anymore with what's going on in the world for various reasons. But power relies on our inability to think and to act. That's why we're in this situation. And most of us will accept anything we're fed. Look at Brexit. Look at people's response to COVID. Look at the current situation in Ukraine. Look at climate change, for God's sake. Everyone is buying into the simple net zero narrative without questioning what that means. In terms of the resource use that will be required to transition to this net zero world, where are we going to get all the bloody lithium? The new wars, everyone's talking, oh, oil is evil. Yeah, we know that. And we shouldn't be dependent on it. No, let's create a new way of generating energy, which requires us to be perhaps more dependent or equally dependent on other resources. No one in that debate really is talking about changing our desires, meaning, or mainstream messages aren't about changing our behaviour. They're just changing what we feed the fucking monster that is capitalism. But that's a different story. So critical thinking, so key. It starts with ambiguity. It starts with an understanding on the part of the individual that there is no objective world out there to be known. There simply isn't. The world out there is simply a reflection of the world in here. When I read something, I'm not reading it really from the author's perspective. I'm reading it from how I interpret it. When I hear a sound outside, I hear it according to my values and beliefs. Everything is mediated through that. And a lot of philosophers have said stuff about this, Kant especially. But, you know, it's this idea that we have to be able to see beyond our own preconceived ideas and beliefs. And that's bloody difficult, because they dictate the way we experience the world. If you're a racist dick, you'll see the world through a racist lens. If you're a vegan authoritarian, you'll see the world through that lens. Ambiguity requires the suspension of this rightness, and a willingness to accept that the world we see is not the world out there. It's the world in here. It's not easy. Critical thinking is not easy. It means you have to open yourself up to the other possibilities and other narratives. At the very least, it requires the subject, you and me, to start trying to explore the world from different perspectives, to see the world through others' eyes. And that is the key to empathetic understanding. And it's bloody difficult. Also, we have to stop just categorising these things in such easy terms. Putin is evil. We know he's a complete and utter bastard, and what he's doing is dreadful. But this labelling as evil suggests that we understand what that word even means. And it's, again, it may very well be true. His actions suggest that it is, but that's not going to lead to constructive dialogue and to the negotiations that are required to end this conflict. Um, and the capacity for critical thinking doesn't mean you condone actions you find abhorrent. I think people are scared that somehow, if they're critical of some of these narrative stories we're being fed, that somehow we're becoming active participants in what we find abhorrent or evil. That's not true. It's just about being or having the capacity to think beyond those headlines, which are all about dumbing you down. We need to be able to experience the world from different perspectives, and that's the key. If World War III happens, it'll be a direct result of those in power being utterly incapable of seeing or hearing the world in its many different colours and guises and through its many different sounds. It'll be fundamentally about an inability to listen. Indeed, if we think about it, listening is actually the key to all this. At the moment, very few people are listening to one another. And diplomatic solutions to crisis start with that ability to listen. We have to listen to what Putin is saying. As I say, despite his actions being abhorrent, there are reasons behind what he is doing. And so we have to begin that dialogue. We have to engage with that and to listen and to say, okay, that expansion of NATO must have really pissed you off. How can we deal with that? How can we change the situation? How can we listen to what you're saying and respond? That's not giving in to his demands. It's just about how can we move through this crisis. And it, as I say, it's all about listening. Because if we don't listen, we will destroy this planet and we will kill every species that shares it with us. Thanks for listening.